All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second ever Doomer Optimism group chat live stream. We got our crew here. We got somebody else incoming, I think, shortly. So, Peter, you and I were just hanging out in Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have dinner with Wendell Berry, but somebody did.
It was super cool. You did get to see like Kingsnorth and the Berry clan. They were
Yeah,
around.
no, it was great. I had a great time.
Yeah. So, yeah, I went down there. A couple of people asked how the dinner went because I was very nervous about it. I thought it was pretty good. I thought I was very nervous about my own performance. Like, don't say too much, but then like, Paul's like a little bit shy somewhat, Paul Kingsnorth, and it's like, you know, he's talking to Wendell Berry, so you've got these two like authors together. Paul, the other thing I didn't really realize, The World Ending Fire is this edited series of essays that Paul Kingsnorth edited of Wendell Berry's work. And they had never met. They only corresponded via letter. And so this was the first time they were meeting, and Paul's idea was to introduce Berry to a UK audience. So like this is the first time they were interacting, which was really cool. But yeah, I thought it was really lovely. Wendell can't really hear very well, so you're like looking him in the face and you have to like move your mouth so he sees what words you're saying. But was at his daughter Mary's house. We had a super nice conversation. There was a lot of conversation about politics, which surprised me. I was like, I would think these people would have given up on politics a long time ago, but they still have faith in like the Democratic Party turning into something useful, which surprised me.
Yeah, these are the yellow dog Democrats?
Yellow Dog, Dixiecrats. Yeah. Yellow Dog. And that name comes from we'd rather vote for a yellow dog than a Republican. That's where that phrase came from. So I was surprised by that. But anyways, yeah. And then there was just like Wendell told a lot of stories, just like almost like rote memory stories, like tell him about the time. His daughter's like, tell him about the time. Daddy, tell him about the time, blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, and the stories were great. I mean, short punchlines. I can't even remember any of them. I should have written something down, but it was too much in the moment. But yeah. And then Peter, what did you think about Paul's talk and being down there?
I thought it was awesome going to the Port Royal Baptist Church. It's just a great experience. Tanya Berry, Wendell's wife, like play the piano while we all sang all 6 verses of "For the Beauty of the Earth" was just like so awesome. It was really awesome to be back in like a Baptist church in the South. It's like pretty
Mm.
cool. I haven't done that in a long time. And then, yeah, I thought it was cool. I was really impressed by Paul's new talk. It was really, really solid. It's like I mean, his book is just so good. And that's another topic we should talk about at some point. But like the book is it's a really good book. And it's a really important piece of like scholarly work, actually.
Yeah, we should talk about that. But I want to say hi to James. James, we're just talking about Peter and I were just hanging out in Kentucky with Wendell Berry and
Hi.
Paul Kingsnorth.
I heard Paul McNeil wasn't invited to that.
No, he just showed up. Also, your mic's really quiet for some reason, James.
Oh, hold
I don't
on.
know.
Sorry.
Sorry,
This
go
is
ahead,
very
Nate.
deep.
You want to say something? You don't have to raise your hand. You could just go.
Oh, no, I was just mocking you because I'm jealous.
How does Wendell Berry not go to any of the Wendell Berry Center events?
I don't think so. I think it's just like too loud. And then also they said it like, so it's hard to hear and focus, but then also he just like gets mobbed and people are talking to him and he doesn't know what they're saying. So he just doesn't go anymore, I don't think. So yeah, it was a really special thing to be able to have dinner with him.
Was he like, who are you? Why are you here?
A little.
I know who Kingsnorth is, but
I
who is
just
this
kept
lady?
saying like, I'm Paul's friend. Thank you for letting me crash this lovely dinner. And then Paul McNeil, and I'm going to talk crap about him, sends me a text the day of, and he goes, I'm kind of mad about. He's going to be mad I said this. I'm kind of mad that you get to go to this dinner and I don't. And I was like, well, skill issue. I'm the one who organized this. So sorry, get yourself on an email chain with Mary Berry and get yourself invited, whatever. And then, so I worked it out. I almost had Peter didn't get there in time. I was going to have Peter and Paul come pick me and Paul Kingsnorth up so that they had an excuse to just cross paths. Peter didn't get there in time. So Paul came and picked us up. Paul walks in and Wendell's like, now who are you? And he's like, "Why are you here? Like, who are you?" And then he like looks at us and he's like, "Are you two together or are you guys a couple or what?" And he's like, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's so confused." But anyways, I got a picture of him shaking Wendell's hand, which is, what he wanted. So, but yeah, let's talk about the book.
We
What do you
have
think
to
of it, Nate?
also, at some point, we've got to talk about Argentina.
Okay, yeah, that too. All right, well, let's focus on the book for a second. I just got it. I just got it at this last event. So you're done with it, Nate?
Yeah, I finished it last week sometime. And right now my 17-year-old is reading it and he is psyched about it. He read the introduction. He's like, "Oh my gosh." He's like, "Who is this?" Um he's like, "I've never read anything," and Quinn's a super avid reader. "I've never read anything that said better how I feel about the way the world is right now."
Mm,
So he's
yeah.
about a third into it now, and he's relating to it as well. But I loved it start to finish, and it got out there. I felt like he didn't shy away from some really interesting topics, and it was kind of a fearless book, I thought.
I was astonished to see it recommended. I haven't actually gotten a copy yet, but I was astonished to see it recommended, like on Audible, where it's like the popular books, and they're usually like dad histories, like how Titan, uh, innovation in tanks, like won World War II, the untold story. And it was like 10 books like that, and then Paul. And I was like, wait, like we've really cracked into something big here.
Yeah.
Did anyone actually read? Sorry, I'm just talking around this, but I'm curious. Did anyone actually read the Alexander Nazarian piece in the New York Times about Kingsnorth?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, I read it. I read it.
Ashley's our resident media consumer.
Yeah, yeah. I read it because I was consulted on it, so I only read pieces where I might be mentioned.
How was it?
It was good. It was good. There was one little comment that was like something Paul Kingsnorth, had skepticism at the outset of the pandemic about like some of the draconian measures that were being put forth, and then parentheses, masks save lives or something like that, or like masks really do work. And I was like, okay, well, that wasn't really necessary. But other than that, it was just like, he's just like a guy who writes about the machine, and he makes good points, and he lives on this little homestead in Ireland and stuff like that.
I was worried because, as you know, I recommended that he talk,
Yes.
and then I was like, oh, if this turns out bad, I'm going to be on.
Yeah. He
I
was
suppose
happy
this.
with it. He was happy with it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I suppose this is a good point to tell the anecdote that Ashley knows, but I'm not sure anyone else does, because my mom is currently reading Paul's novels, which are dense and historically informed, you might say, and not the kind of thing my mom has. I think they're like Saxon histories and stuff. So it's like, my mom was like, so this Paul Kingsnorth guy, he's like, what's his theme is what? And I wasn't really sure how to answer that question, but Ashley knows this story. But when they were trying to color Theo and like our event stuff as very dangerous and bad in The Guardian, I spoke to one of the reporters, and he was sort of questioning me on a personal level, like, how can you talk to Paul Kingsnorth? Don't you know that this guy is bad? And I asked him like what the reasoning for that was, like what evidence he had. And he said, well, if you pick up the novels, they have nationalist undertones. And that was their rationale for why we shouldn't host him. And I thought that was very funny, but I have not read them, so I can't speak to it.
Yeah. So funny anecdote from this weekend. It was me, Paul McNeil, Paul Kingsnorth driving back from the dinner. And Paul McNeil's talking about how he's like, friends with a lot of these tech guys, network state, whatever. And he's like, I'm too Luddite for my tech friends, and I'm too tech for my Luddite friends. I'm too lib for my fascist friends. I'm too fascist for my lib friends. And Paul Kingsnorth goes like, you have fascist friends? And he goes, yeah, you're one of them. I was like, dude, you're original eco-fash, whatever. You don't gotta embrace it.
Would
Yeah.
I
Is
qualify as one of
nationalist
the
is
lib
nationalist a
friends?
bad word? Is national? I thought I knew
I
nationalism,
think
but is nationalist
I
a bad
think in
word
The
too?
Guardian it is.
Ah,
I think not to make this heavy or something, but I think if you were going to speak seriously about like what's going fault, the fundamental fault line is like between people who have a nationalist outlook and people who have a nations are no longer relevant outlook. And you can trace most of the stuff that's going on now to some bifurcation along those lines. And so I think there was this thing that sorry, I'm doing a disquisition, but it's relevant because I think there was a thing that happened where, Irish nationalists could be left wing and to some degree, like both nationalist and internationalist at the same time. And like Quebecois nationalists could do the same thing and things like that. And that was a long history of the left through the 20th century. And then suddenly, like that became, in many people's eyes, untenable, lamentably so, in my view. But I think for certain people who have the mindset of the guy I was speaking to at that time, that designates you as being on the wrong side of history. It designates you not just as like,
there needs to be a narrative of decolonialism, right? So like a country for the left is allowed to be nationalist if they're throwing off a colonial oppressor, but not otherwise. And there's probably
it's ironic.
on that.
Paul is
Well,
very.
it's ironic because it's like, good.
I was saying, Paul, this book really comes right out swinging on this question. I mean, it's pretty unabashedly like, I'm not apologizing for being nationalist and, and loving sort of like my English history. And I think that, England is a valuable country as a nation. So it like comes right out swinging on that question, like right away.
Does he talk about Ireland at all within that and the tension of English nationalism and
No, not really. I mean, I think maybe
living in
like in
Ireland?
passing he mentions it, but definitely not. It's not a theme.
But I think there's an important distinction to make here where, like, I didn't get the impression from reading Paul's book that it's actually nationalist. It's like, it's about culture over the state. And actually, like, the boogeyman of the whole book is the English state. Like, it's like the nation of England that's the bad guy. And it's the good guy is like the inherent culture that the state destroyed. And so I think we've got to like make a distinction between like having, being for your tradition and your like, your ancestors' tradition versus being for the nation of the place that you come from.
Mm-hmm.
Berry talks about this when he talks about the difference between patriotism and nationalism.
Right.
He talks about place-based patriotism a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, Peter, I mean, you get into the whole discussion of like the nation state as a relatively new phenomenon. It's a product of modernity. And so I think that's an interesting kind of angle that, you have like a homeland, but the nation state is kind of an imposition and a homogenizing force that, smooths out all the cultural idiosyncrasies of subcultures. Right. And that's a very valid critique of the nation state, but I don't know if that's what nationalists, so-called nationalists say in the United States. I don't think that's what they're talking about per se. Like it's kind of confused. I think a lot of people have incoherent ideas about these things, to be honest.
I felt like he was pretty pro nation as a general principle, though. He talked about the EU a little bit and just this tendency towards dissolving national boundaries in a very critical light.
Well,
So speaking of selling out your nation, Nate, you've been posting all day about how our president is selling out ranchers and farmers by buying their beef from Argentina. Do you want to go into your rant about that?
Well, I just think it's really notable what's going on in Argentina this last week has been pretty wild. So it's like buying Argentinian pesos to the tune of like, I think, what is it, 40 billion at this point, $40 billion. And then, due to the tariffs, the soybean market in the U.S. drying up, prices through the floor. Then Argentina is selling to China, so their soybean market is, booming, where ours, has gone off a cliff, which, and I think a lot of farmers are kind of watching that and sort of like, okay, well, there's going to be some turbulence because, these tariffs, trying to rebalance the market, blah, blah, blah. But then he goes out last night and announces they got a big deal to bring down beef prices. And that big deal is, essentially boils down to importing more Argentinian beef. And man, people just been outraged about it. And I think a lot of people who are like, hey, trust the process are kind of like, oh, fuck this. It's like, the free market, which isn't really a free market in ag at all, but like, hey, it makes it so for once ranchers are kind of winning. Like cattle prices have been really good and cattle ranchers can make some money. And then no, we can't have that. And then it's just like a very obvious, like, let's rig the market just really transparently. Let's just do this and fuck your prices directly. And so people are pretty pissed. And I feel like a lot of people, it's sort of like that straw that broke the camel's back, where, like I said, they were kind of trust the process a little bit. And then it seems like, no, this is just like a knife right in the back.
Peter, James, do either of you have something to say about that?
Well, I would put for context that, sort of one of the many sub narratives of the Trump administration has been this kind of funny thing where first the Maha gang, like, was very optimistic. And then there was this, I actually talked to this guy. Does anyone know Dustin Kittle from Twitter?
Yeah.
No.
So I talked to Dustin, and I actually didn't know this just because I have too many things that I follow. But, he was on a team of people prepping for a potential Massey Department of Ag. There was this kind of optimism around the idea of Massey. And if you want to think about this philosophically, like, you have this approach of like, okay, we hate the environmental structure that America has adopted because it is in certain ways like the ultimate expression of the regulatory state, and we've set out to destroy the regulatory state. And then in ag, you have this amazing opportunity where you can kind of like deregulate and actually do things that would be like potentially environmentally beneficial, potentially good for the American productive economy, potentially good for like small scale people. And so there was this kind of idea that something really good could come out of this. Then Brooke Rollins comes in, and there was this, I think if you were coming from a sort of mainstream liberal perspective, there was this moment where people got really mad at Brooke Rollins because she had made those comments about pig crates. I'm not sure if there's a more specific word, but about confinement crates for pigs and raising them in CAFOs. And there was a backlash on the MAGA right of like, wait, we don't actually like this stuff. Like, this isn't what we're supposed to be about. And speaking of nationalism, there was almost a nationalist backlash in the sense of like, America is supposed to be a better nation than confining pigs in crates for their entire lives. There's even, you could say, like a white nationalist background. There's like backlash that was like white people should be better than doing this. And so there was this like ferment that is specifically focused on ag and the Department of Ag. And then over time, there's been this kind of, first of all, dashing of their hopes. You can see that, you can see that in the, Antonio and Banjo just got here, in the way that, for example, they've like tried to insulate Monsanto from the results of, what is it? Like, they're trying to make them immune to like lawsuits from glyphosate poisoning and stuff. And you've had this increasing just like disillusionment on this entire wing of the party. And you've actually like seen a break, I think, like amongst a lot of people who are like the most diehard Trump people, where they've just become so angry that they have turned sort of to feeling like, Nate, that's my back.
Jason, Peter, you have anything to add?
I mean, you can understand politically why Trump is doing it, right? Like he is getting flack for like inflationary, groceries and rising beef prices, and this seemed like an easy win for him. But it doesn't really seem like he understands all of the implications of it. I don't know. I mean, it's a flip side, right? Like, good prices for producers are bad prices for consumers. That's kind of the center, in a vacuum, without considering larger context. That's kind of the thing. And so what if, okay, maybe a pathway for this conversation is, if you were Trump, so just imagine it, just, embody this figure, and you wanted to bring down beef prices, but you didn't want to sell out ranchers and farmers, what would you do?
Peter, do you have an answer to that?
I mean, the answer is that we can't bring down beef prices. Like,
You're fired.
the price of meat has been artificially high since World War II, and profoundly so. Like,
Low.
it's just in a different universe from reality, propped up by subsidies for corn and beans, essentially. All the things that everybody is freaking out about right now with soybeans in Argentina. And to me, it's just like, well, like nothing has changed. It's like we still have this system that is increasingly becoming monopolized by these same four corporations. And so, like, whether it's like Argentina or not, I mean, like, it's already a globalized system. We're already importing a ton of beef. Like, if he signs a deal with Argentina to bring a little bit more in and that brings the price down, it's like we're just arguing at the margins. Like, the fundamentals haven't changed, and they're still plowing in the direction of monopolization and centralization and loss of sovereignty and food security for this country. And so until we like are actually having a conversation about that And that will require prices to go up. I mean, there's just no way around that. I mean, I heard an interesting, there's a guy that wrote a book about like basically arguing that the United States government plowing money post World War II into the USDA to prop up grain farmers and to make cheap grains was like a way to hide the inflation after getting off the gold standard, essentially, or not right after World War, a little bit later, but basically it's like it's a way of hiding inflation by making food artificially cheap, so the consumers don't actually like see day to day what's happening with the loss of value of the currency. And I think that argument has a lot of merit. And so until we address that problem, like whether or not, soybeans are going to China from here or Argentina is sort of like, I mean,
So
it's
that,
kind of a silly even thing to worry about. I mean, not for the soybean farmers, obviously, but like, why are we growing soybeans anyway? Like, it
so
doesn't even
this
make
relates
And
to
that's
a
the
conversation we were having in a group chat, the new agrarians, about what is our political platform, national political platform, and for me, just given the way that our political system works, there is no theory of change through national politics, because anything that causes beef prices to rise, even if it's good for us in the long run, is not going to be voted for, and it's going to be those politicians are going to be chased out. Uh, and so, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into this whole like theory of change of like national politics, but
James
this
wants
goes back to what I've been hammering. This is my hobby horse. So feel free to just change directions, but
yeah.
it's just all bullshit, right? Like, we're not going to make change through these national political. Maybe on the margins we will, but
But I
We
think
tr
that gets to what I was just saying about currency, is that because at the root of all of these issues is the fact that we are devaluing our currency massively. And so, yes, you can't get elected if you're like, promoting programs or policies that are going to make prices go up. But that's going up relative to this massively devalued currency over time. And so, if you can have a platform that fights that, then like sure, relative beef prices might go up, but livelihoods go way up because the value of currency is maintained and is flatlined, and it doesn't just isn't just collapsing around us. And so to me, like that's the real crux of the issue, is the value of money and how to stop the free fall of fiat currency.
and I would add
Peter,
too,
you
sort of
just
like with the
you stole what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
go ahead, James.
No, I mean, I was just going to piggyback off of that. I mean, like, I think, like, if you were going to have an argument for the sort of outsized potential power of democratic politics to kind of deal with some of this stuff, like, it's the macro situation and the fact that I think just regular people are like fairly well aware of the fact that we've just had artificially low interest rates for a really long time now. And that, like, it's funny, I was talking to a former Fed governor. Of course, he was the guy from the Kansas City Fed. He was the head of the Kansas City Fed for a long time. And he's famously the guy who voted against quantitative easing and like had his basically like life, career, and reputation destroyed because he was like, well, this is going to cause massive outsized asset inflation. And just to like, if you were going to sharpen what Peter's saying, like to a particular example, what this led to was a massive increase in the price of land throughout the United States. And thus, did you make it a lot harder for people to get into farming? And so, if you adjusted that structure and you didn't have basically like free money that was being pumped through Citibank and Cantor Fitzgerald into the system to cause land prices to be wildly devalued, like, would you have this same problem of like the literal cost like that someone like Peter has in producing beef? Would you have the same problems? And then if you have fewer input problems, would you have to have the prices be what they are? You might actually be able to resolve this problem in a way that we have not been able to think about before. That would be how I would look at it in a hopeful light. And you would devalue the dollar, and so that you're more competitive against imports in the first place. And that's been the big problem as well.
We also would be remiss not to mention that, and I think one thing that actually could maybe, that is a part of, especially you mentioned it last week, Peter, a huge part of the price is, packing. And I think so attacking the packing monopolies is just a good idea. And I don't know how much it would It might bring prices down a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, it's just going to make a better market. And I think you have to pick, like we talked about last week with the AI. It's like I'm not quite like, okay, completely tune out of national politics, because there's places where you might not be interested in national politics, but national politics is very interested in you. And so laser
Mm.
focus on a couple issues. To me, bringing up those packing monopolies would be an outstanding cause to focus laser like on, because these companies are rotten. I mean, JBS is a rotten corporation. It's a criminal enterprise masquerading as a company. And like we should try to like go to war with them. That's a kind
Why
of
do you
cause.
hate Brazilians, Nate?
But is there a constituency to
Okay,
do that?
I'll own it if it means we can take down JBS. Whatever tools we need to use, man.
But is there a mass constituency to do that, to overpower the lobbying power of the Packers or
This
whoever?
is the question, yeah. I
Probably
mean,
not, but that doesn't stop me from hollering about it. I think it's a good. I mean, I think it's a very if you really know the story, it's a very unsympathetic story. I'd like to think that
I
people.
mean, I've had
I think
lots of
there is.
conversations about
Yeah.
this, and I think it's like once you frame the issue for people, it's a no-brainer. I mean, the extent of monopolization is like highly anti-American. Like we have a long history of like antitrust and wanting to have more decentralization here. And like the level of corruption that's well documented within these systems. I mean, the fact that we're like the cartel is a massive producer of or importer of cattle into the United States through Mexico with the blessing of JBS. I mean, all of this has been well documented, and it's just an issue that people don't know about. So I feel like there would be a mass constituency of people that would be highly in favor of breaking up these monopolies and regulating. It's just an information, like nobody's talking about it. It's just not on the people's radar.
Imagine the bully pulpit, somebody like using that and being like, here's the story. This is what, instead of like, hey, we need to bring down beef prices, so let's buy more, like a very short term. Imagine somebody like using the bully pulpit or something, to be able to, because it is an extremely sympathetic story. It's just jaw dropping if you really follow it closely. It's terrible.
I mean, okay, so we live in this world where like we're governed by like a basically czarist system where it's like there's now like a very direct line amongst like certain people on the right who have like enough of a constituency, like from their basically like media following to like influence the czar, but nobody like criticizes the czar. Everyone says that it's the czar's courtiers who are like screwing everything. Like that's basically like how the thing works now, for better or for worse, right? And if you wanted to look at it in the most favorable possible light, there's a glimmer of hope here, whatever. I'm not saying that this is necessarily my view, but the thing is that a lot of the people who like actually are shouting at the czar are pretty influential and pretty obsessed with this stuff, And so like you guys probably have heard of or seen on Twitter, like Merriweather Farms and like Catherine O'Neill, and like, like this is someone who worked in the administration, left and went into ranching, and like is deeply, deeply, deeply familiar with these things. And like right now, there's a Brooke Rollins figure who's like very much like aligned with the John Thunes of the world, and like isn't really familiar even with these conversations. And I think what she's noticing is that maybe not because of like the kind of things that would animate this conversation, she's finding that she's like losing the constituency of people that would allow her to effectively do the job, in large part because like she keeps saying stuff about immigration where she's like, oh, we need like more immigrant labor on the farms, and then everyone gets like really mad, and then the more sort of like small farm help the ranchers kind of conversations come in because they say like, you're also bad on this other thing. And she's like been a lightning rod in a way that like, you haven't seen this kind of backlash to the system in a way that I think like that really wasn't a thing present under not only like previous Republican administrations, but even under Democrats. That's my one thing. The other way I would put this too is like, if you had this macro structure that Peter's talking about, and you had a regulatory state that these companies got so good at manipulating because they had the armies of lawyers, and like you just couldn't do anything because it was so obscure to democratic politics. Legislating didn't really work anymore. to imagine a world in which they just like blow up that regulatory state and the macro stuff goes away, in large part because we're just losing control of the system and gold is like spiking to, it'll be like $5,000 by the end of the year. Like this may all change in part because people blew it up, in part because the rest of the world's not letting us debt finance this thing. And so like can cause all the currency weirdness that Peter's talking about. And so there could be a potential, not that like anyone's going to do it on purpose, but that like the thing that took away people's sense of agency on these issues, that system just no longer is there. And then it'll be up to Nate to like win the argument about where to go forward. But I don't know. I'm just trying to put a hopeful gloss on it. But I do think there's a version of it that could be like.
Talking about that backlash is sort of interesting because I think, you have the farmers, the big grain farmers, who are, 75, 80 years old, who basically they won. They won the last round of consolidation. So they're pretty pleased with the big ag regime because it's been really good to them. But they, famously kind of within the ag world, they're holding on to control like this. And so there's another generation of farmers, some of which are pushing 60, who are still working for their dads and then younger than that, of course, too. And I think they're seeing all this happen and are way more restless and unhappy with the sort of regime as it has been than sort of ag has been kind of quiet and sort of accepting the largesse of the government in terms of subsidies and sort of pretty like go with the flow and kind of they're very structured by the banks and the seed companies and John Deere and whatnot, like kind of run things. And again, I think that the generation of 75, 80-year-olds have been pretty fine with that. But that seems to be changing. So there's kind of an interesting ferment right now, I think, among farmers who, up until now have been pretty, Farm Bureau's got our back, vote Republican, and like it's fine.
I mean, I want to remind our former selves, like beginning of the podcast selves, that like part of what we always talked about theory of change was that we're entering this chaotic period where there's just a lot of material changes happening. And I would argue that's also true in politics. Like it's just it feels very chaotic. I have no idea what the Democrats are going to do. You never know what Trump is going to do. I don't know what the future of the Republican Party looks like. And not just that, there's all these other material things that are like coming up against limits. And then the whole idea was that we always talked about like, we're ready with the plan when everything breaks down. I mean, that's basically like what's playing out. There's just a lot of moving parts. It's hard to predict exactly which of them will force a change. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm starting to get more hopeful in the doomer optimist way. Like, remember we were trying to define doomer optimism before.
Like chaos is a ladder way, you're saying?
Right. Yeah.
Can
Chaos
I throw
is
a
also
question to
fire
Nate?
that burns the ladder as well.
Yeah, go
That's
ahead.
true.
So one thing, and I maybe like should have an answer to this myself, and it's a kind of, in a way, stupid question, but you look at the conversation that I think has arisen in the mainstream here in the last few months about, the soybean farmers are getting screwed, right? And like, I think there's this kind of thing that it naturally sort of agrarian sympathetic casual media consumer does, where they go like, oh, look, like Trump's screwing the farmers, like he's even screwing his own base, blah, 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 right? And like, I'm totally willing to believe that. With regard to like those row croppers you're talking about, like I look and I'm like, wait, so like our like global soybean production, basically, as far as I understand it, like the main thing it does is feed Chinese pigs to sort of answer the mass demand in China for like mass produced, criminally, cruelly produced pork that sustains the Chinese diet. And like, meanwhile, soybean production in the United States is incredibly detrimental to our national health and national environmental health. Like, okay, yes, the farmers are getting screwed, but am I wrong in looking at this and going like, why do I care? And apologies to any soybean farmers out there, but you can see just as a like, what's good for America kind of question, like these are the kind of things I kind of feel like we should be asking.
Well, yeah, and you do the same thing with corn. It's like it's making,
Precisely, yeah.
It's making shitty fuel and animal feed as well. And I mean, the heartland in particular creates industrial products for an industrial system. It doesn't really
Mhm.
grow food. Like, we don't really grow food. We there's been this slogan for 40 years, we got to feed the world, right? This is what we like. You just make a mass amount of calories to feed the world, right? Which means, yeah, shipping soybeans to, hogs to like literal, like towers, like concrete towers. These pigs are raised in these giant concrete towers, awful, like apocalyptic looking prisons, just terrible. And that's what our soybeans are doing. And so it's like, we have the slogan "feed the world," but that's what that means. It does, like, we've really become completely divorced in mass, like the mass agriculture from, actually feeding people food. And I think that's a really powerful way back. Actually, is just to continue to focus relentlessly on, we need to feed people food. American farmers should feed American people healthy food. American farmers feed American people healthy food.
Mhm.
That's a winner, I think. But because that's not what we do. It's not what we do. We're growing industrial stock for these various inhumane systems.
So you were, I mean, for the record, you were kind of pleased that there's some pressure on those
Yeah, no, I know.
systems.
I like it. The chaos is interesting, and like the chaos in the soybean market. I mean, I live right here in the middle of all this, and my neighbors are bean farmers, and they have, huge. Some of them have huge herds of cattle. Cattle is iffy in the Midwest. A lot of row crop farmers see them as just an unnecessary hassle. But so people around that, it's so strange because I don't want just things to collapse. I don't want my neighbors to be hurt, even though I do want them to change. But there's not, I have sympathy there too, because it's not like there's an easy off ramp. If you're, you have so much machinery that it's, you
There's
know,
so much infrastructure around
so
these
much.
industrial
And
farms.
so that, it's like we talked about this a little bit last time, like it's kind of like turning an ocean liner here. So, but at the same time, these shocks and this pressure is probably good overall because the system makes no sense and isn't, is inhumane. It grows industrial products for a feeding a system that's very bad.
What are the opportunities do you guys think for regenerative farmers in this kind of chaos? Particularly, I'm looking at Peter and Nate.
I mean, I think that, the main opportunity is just like, Nate's talking, farmers don't produce food for people, right? And there actually now is a demand of people who are like realizing that fact that you go to the store and that's like not actual food. And like people are starting to look for actual food and there needs to be farmers to produce that for them. We do need to have like I mean, it's like the only avenue we have right now to have any semblance of a local economy. Um, eh, like export-based economies like destroy localities. And so if we have non-export based economies where we're actually producing things for the people that live there, that's actually like that's the first step, right? Like we've got to be able to do that. If we can't do that, we can't do anything that we talk about like wanting to do, like the direction the world's got to go. Like if we can't feed ourselves at the most basic level, like none of that's going to happen. Like that's the base of the pyramid. So we got to secure the base. The good news is that is something, going back to the conversation about like politics and change, like that's an apolitical thing. Like everybody wants it. Everyone wants healthy food. Everybody wants healthy soil. Everybody is like anti-CAFO and anti-pigs in concrete bunkers. Like all of that is like nobody wants that. I mean, that's like 99% of the country is on board with that. And so
More people
like
want that than I'm comfortable with, to be honest. The CAFO
More
thing.
people want the CAFOs, you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of people really don't give a shit. It's hard for me to get my mind around, but I think a lot of people just don't care about that.
you're in Illinois and so that doesn't really count. I think we can just like throw Illinois out to toss them out as an outlier.
There's plenty
Well,
of
the
people in
other
New
thing to
England who don't
that
give a
too.
shit either.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that I think is interesting is like there's this constituency in the U.S. of people who are like you might call them like socially liberal and economically like libertarian. This is sort of like classic establishment minded worldview that um, shaped us for a long time, and they're like wildly overrepresented in all forms of American media, like from Twitter to like the pages of magazines to everywhere. And these guys are like obsessed with this idea that if you like tariffs marginally reduce the I have a question that I'm coming to here. I'm not just lecturing, but they have this idea that like if tariffs marginally reduce the profitability of, you know, America's row croppers, like there's going to be this like massive global food crisis. And like you have these things, I've been like chewing on this because I now like am like dead set to this idea that we need a think tank to talk about this stuff, because I've been chewing on this report from I think the Breakthrough Institute saying that if America switched simply to organic food production, like we would have to basically paper over, I think it was cropland the size of Iowa to make up for the loss in productivity, just calorifically, to like make up the food deficit that we would create by going organic.
Mm.
And like, what is fascinating about that is that like, okay, what would you get from canceling ethanol subsidies? Like, what would you get if you didn't export whatever percent of our soybean production overseas? Like, why is the entire structure of this thing, as Peter said, like oriented towards profitability via exports? And like, why are we talking about us not being able to feed ourselves when in fact we export so much? But then I think if you wanted to be like fair-minded about it, the trick is that their profit margins are so low that like if you wanted to do what I personally would like to do, which is just hammer their profits to the point that it's just disincentivized to do what they're doing, and then suddenly, whoa, like Iowa land values are suddenly way cheaper. And so you can do, a lot more people can do what Peter's doing, and maybe you could just systemically adjust. Would that happen in such a way as to basically destroy America's food system and cause a crisis first? I don't know. And I'm curious if anyone has a thought on that, but that's sort of like the problem, I think. Also, who is buzzing?
Maybe Jason? Yeah.
Well,
That's
first of all,
Jason.
you shouldn't take seriously somebody who's doing a report saying like, "Oh, this would be, we'd have to like if everything went organic," because it would be the stupidest thing in the world to be like, "Let's just make our farming organic." Like that's not a solution. Nobody who really thinks about this thinks, "Oh, the solution making everything better is to just go organic." So right, they're arguing against a really stupid straw
To be
man
clear,
begin
I
with.
was meaning to make that clear that I thought that was a stupid straw
Yeah, well, and
Right.
I'm sure
I'm
the
just putting a finer
statistics are
point on it there, James.
man.
statistics are always cooked with these kinds of things, these kinds of abundance, you know, high tech or whatever, anti-organic thing. They extrapolate based on some ridiculous assumptions. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Well, I want to hear what Peter said, and I wanted to also say, Peter, I wasn't disagreeing with you when I pointed that out. I was disturbed by how many people seem to like K-foods. I was really in agreement with you, but on that part, I was like, I wish I totally agreed with the 99% thing about CAFO specifically. But anyway, I was with you with the broader point for sure.
What do you think, Peter? You're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, you know, these are really big issues. And I mean, like the Breakthrough Institute, there's a lot of these quasi-environmental organizations that are really good at making these straw mans and then beating them down. It's a really well-polished strategy. And obviously that's like a ridiculous notion of switching everything to organic. But like, I mean, the amount of corn that goes to ethanol, the amount of soybeans that go to Chinese pork, like literally, if we just focused on feeding our people, we would have way extra land available. Like it would require a fraction of the amount of agricultural land that we have in production right now. And everybody thinks like, oh, well, if we switch to regenerative systems, they're less efficient, so we need more land, and that's bad for the earth. And that's just so far off. It's like, yeah, if we want to feed everybody and we want to feed all of our cars with corn, if that's our priority, but like, if you talk to the random average person, like that's nobody's priority. Like nobody thinks we should be like slaughtering ecosystems in order to have like a fuel for our car that makes it less efficient and break down more often. Like add a net energy
Nobody
loss.
asked for this.
We had studies. I was reading studies in the mid 90s. David Pimental in Minnesota was doing studies showing that corn ethanol is a net EROI loss. Like it takes more energy to produce than you get out of it. Like it's nonsensical from any perspective, except for the one in you know the system currently in place.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. I mean, that's the thing. If it causes your truck to break down, then you've got to take it to a place, you've got to buy a new part, and that's growth. That's
I know.
sufficiency in our society. Like
You know
literally
what?
people think like that, you know?
Well, this whole conversation makes me think of the fact that Chris Mage had to write a whole book debunking George Monbiot's whole idea of like we can just eradicate all farms and feed everybody on like microbial, like, I don't know, vat grown food. And he had to write a whole book about this, and almost nobody paid attention to it. And yet these like Guardian pieces keep coming out about like the future of food and this kind of stuff. Like, it's just so crazy that we like just amongst the five of us know so much about what's wrong about these like abundance statistics. But I think we do actually need a think tank and get these like things written down.
So according to this AI overview
No.
that I Googled, 40% of the U.S. corn crop is used for ethanol. 35 to 44% is used for animal feed. So let's talk about that second one.
Okay.
So I think ideally, Peter, in your system, we wouldn't be growing all of this corn for animal feed. We would be, grazing them on the land. And so in terms of this discussion of like how much land is used for what, how does freeing up the cows and having them graze, but then not using that land for corn production to feed them, how does that figure into it? Or I don't know, just thoughts.
Well, I mean, just like let's like go back for just a second. 40% of corn goes to ethanol.
Yeah.
40%
Right.
of the arable land that's planted into crops, into corn in the United States is not for any kind of
Right.
food.
So I mean, if you take both of those together, about 20% or less is actually used for human consumption.
Well,
Directly.
what's directly? That's right. That's right.
Of corn.
And there may, I mean,
Did we
I'm
just
not
look?
even
Just lose Peter.
I think
necessarily.
soybeans are similar, though. I think soybeans are similar to What's that?
What's that?
You broke
We
up.
lost you
You
for a
broke
second.
up for a
Go
second,
ahead.
Peter.
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Oh, I mean, I was just saying that we have a tremendous amount of slack in our system. I mean, I think, and at a higher level, there is a logic to like doing, say, corn ethanol and like keeping your agricultural production system like at max capacity so that if there is a drought or whatever, you have reserves. You divert the corn out of ethanol and you put it into people. And so, like from a very global perspective, like the corn ethanol thing keeps farmers growing corn and keeps the silos full. So there is a little bit of like a national prepping strategy at play that you could argue as is one of the benefits of corn ethanol. But it's obvious that if you remove that, we have the tremendous land base available to grow food. You can say it's less efficient, and from a very narrow point of view, it's less efficient to grow beef on an acre of Iowa crop ground than it is to grow corn. It's like you're not going to get the yield in terms of calories if that's what you're looking at, especially in the short term because you've destroyed the soil. You like literally have no soil biology. Like all the mycorrhizal fungus is gone, all the beneficial biology that helps plants like pull minerals out of the soil and be healthy, like all that's gone. You got to rebuild that. That takes time. It takes intelligence and effort and strategy to rebuild all of that. But eventually, if you have actual human beings on the land and you're actually trying to develop sort of like integrated systems, the theoretic capacity of the land to produce is much, much, much higher than even 250 bushel an acre corn in central Iowa, because you've got you can have fish systems integrated and fruits and crops, and you're leveraging the sunshine coming in a three-dimensional system instead of a one-dimensional system. But that all requires time, labor, expertise, intelligence, and traditional knowledge that we've like lost. So, that's like the distant horizon. That's like the mountain we're trying to move towards.
So here's another factor is that you said labor. So a lot more people would have to be on the land to make those kinds of systems possible at this kind of broad, large scale.
Or a lot more robots.
What's that?
Or a lot more robots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can robots kind of like manage permacultural systems and kind of like, figure everything out and hop across the soil and
You've seen Star Wars?
getting their gears going dirt?
Robots.
Okay, so taking the robots out of it for a second, because that's a cursed thought, robots on farms. But, assuming that we move in the direction we want, a lot more people are going to want to have to get involved with agriculture. Now, I think that the low-hanging fruit is land prices, right? And just affordability, that will get you a few percentage points probably. But what's going to be the big thing that the return to the land event that gets people excited about farming again?
I mean, Jason, the robot joke is actually apropos here. Like, because you have already, forget AI, like forget AI, forget the robotic revolution, all this stuff. You have, first of all, levels of societal discontent, just in terms of like the labor that people currently do. Like, they don't really like it. Like, I don't even like talking to you guys. Like, I mean, I do, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I would rather not be doing this. And like, this is what everyone does for a job. And like, that is, I think, arguably societally untenable. Leave that aside. That's just a thought that I think most people like in these spaces like agree with. But as a simple like excess of labor, like if we're gonna not have fake money washing through the system and a debt finance system that creates that fake money that allows for this stuff, like all of these email jobs are to some degree downstream of ZERP and like cheap money policies. And at a certain point, you're going to have a lot of people who literally just don't have that kind of job. And that's not like some pie in the sky doomer optimism like back to the land thing. That's just where this is headed. Then you add in AI, you're literally going to have, I think, beyond the demand that people have sort of like latently in their bellies about satisfying work, you're going to have a labor pool of people who are like, what do I do? Like, what do we do with these people who are here? And I think that's going to be like a fairly big question. You're going to have to, like, in a long sense, you're going to have to UBI this, or you're going to have like a restructuring of how our productive economy works and getting people back into it. And like, it may be a combination thereof, but I don't really see a way out of that trap. And I think that's something people are looking into. I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I sort of suspect that if you could do this right, there would be a need for the work and a demand for the work from the worker side.
One of
The other thing I'm going to throw in here is that we need a human labor and like really thoughtful human labor to like
Peter, we keep
rehab
right before we
the
said what we
destruction
need.
that's been
We're
created
now gonna get what we
and to
need.
set up new systems.
Wait, hold on, Peter. We
Hey,
lost
Peter,
you.
lost
Right
you.
after you
start
said-
over with we need. You paused.
So
We
now
were
Okay.
all hanging on the edge of our seats.
All
What
right,
do
am
we
I
need?
back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes.
Okay, so it is going to take a lot of labor and intentional thought and creativity to set up these new systems and restore the brokenness. But at some point, like this is the beautiful thing about like nature versus the machine is like the machine is expensive to maintain. It requires constant fuel. It's constantly breaking down. It requires constant maintenance. Like nature does all this stuff for free. And I say this in my talks, like there was more meat in the United States before white people showed up. Like straight up, like with no, I mean, the Indians were burning, but like there weren't agricultural systems. There weren't millions of farmers out there working and toiling by the sweat of their brow. It was just nature working. So to some extent, like, yes, it takes a lot of labor to set these systems up, but if we're smart about it, we like wean ourselves off of it. I mean, we like, and let nature take over the productive capacity of the land. And like, that sounds really pie in the sky, but actually like, there's 20 million years of history backing up that statement. Like, it's not radical at all. The radical thing is what we're doing now, growing soybeans.
Yeah.
and it's like
Well, finally,
a big
another
psyop.
example or easier of going back to the office job.
Wait, so Jason, say that again.
I said, yeah, well, it'll take a lot of labor to set up, but then nature will start working for us, and then we'll finally have the time to go back to our office jobs.
No, we can pick.
Thank goodness.
We can pick plums and eat plums and write poetry and do all that silly stuff. But the biggest psyop, please people haven't heard that use that term ever, is mass urbanization. It's insane. It's so much nicer to live out in the country and be on the land and like do that. It's freaking great. It's awesome. It's an amazing way to live. And, you know, people don't get that. And then you have this, like, there's this big story that people don't get that because, you know, they don't want that. And I think part of that has been sort of like a mass cultural indoctrination that people have learned they don't want that. Part of it is just straight up people have been economically forced from it. You know, I mean, it's but it's great. It's freaking awesome. Like you love it out there. It's really great. It's fantastic to live out and do this.
Well, here's why I'm white pilled about America is that we have this love of cowboys and cowboy culture. They're like the cultural icons. And honestly, to restore these systems, we need like 1 million cowboys, like literally 1 million cowboys. And so, like, for people that are like tired of their jobs and tired of sitting in front of Zoom calls all day, like, go be a cowboy. Like, what could be cooler than that?
It's
It's
not that
just so
hard of a
funny to
goal.
me. Like, we have this narrative, and it's amazing to me that this like actually was something that anyone accepted, not simply because I like don't like the narrative, but because it's not descriptive of American politics. But there's this like thing of like, oh, the mass demand for urbanization, which, as you point out, was forced by many things that went beyond personal choices. But then like this idea, in fact, that like people would prefer this kind of like pack 'em stack 'em condo life, that this was like actually like the thing that people wanted, and it's just not descriptive of how Americans make decisions. And so then they get really mad because like Americans move to the suburbs, and it's like at some point you're just going to have to go with that tendency because it's not going away. And so like probably having everyone live in a suburb of Dallas where they can afford to have a half acre and feel like they're kind of still living a cowboy life or an outside life, like, is not the right solution. So like, how would you intentionally look at that and go with it? You know?
Somebody was posting on Twitter like a meme of like the suburban who's like mowing their lawn. That's like this kind of suppressed agrarian urge, right? But it's like mowing the lawn is like the closest they can get to that, and they want to go
For
back, but they
sure.
don't see how economically
Well,
they have
all
to
of
keep
this
their office
stuff,
job.
like, I mean, not to just be, sociologist about it, but all of this stuff was just completely manufactured, including even like, now you Google things and you get AI. Nobody asked for that. Nobody asked for ethanol. Nobody asked for suburbs. Like, nobody asked for any of this. It was just manufactured. It was just created by, people who decided that they wanted to profit because, these systems help them profit more. So, I mean, there's nothing that's stopping something else from being manufactured except for like power and money. So no big deal.
Well, and not to keep banging this drum, but actually like it's that we removed a lot of these questions from the realm of politics. Like we put these in the hands of regulators, and regulators made decisions that were very obscure with long lasting consequences. And like,
And we called it the free market.
that system's going to have to go away. Yeah. And that was insane because it wasn't. I'm just going to
But there's
piggyback
also
off
this like
something Peter said.
internalized oppression too, right? Where like the HOA that you're in, like the people who are enforcing the HOA are your neighbors. They're not the regulators, right? But you can argue it's like this internalized oppression.
Yes.
To
Mhm.
borrow a
Yeah.
concept from
Well,
somewhere else.
I've heard that called inverse totalitarianism, where like we're the totalitarians of ourselves now. We've adopted all of these systems and now we're defending them, even though they're systems nobody ever asked for, but we adopted. James, you were going to say you were going to piggyback off of one of
I was
Peter
just going to piggyback off something Peter had said, which is because I can see someone in the chat saying that it's not true. I did a thing recently where, feel free to check my math, but I did a thing recently where you add up. I was trying to figure out, without having to farm and without having to hunt, so like without having to do any work, like real work, like how many people could California feed before like the Spanish Conquest? And if you just take acorns and salmon, and so like I'm leaving aside like a huge amount of other calories, but just take acorns and salmon. And the number is like in the tens of millions of people, where you could just set up a fish weir and go like send the kids out to get acorns. And you just like could feed a population nearly the size of what California was in like 1975, like with no work whatsoever. So if you like put in a little bit of work, like it's insane. And that is like, I mean, the productivity of that system, like it's so different from how people think of like what productive places are in the East, because it's like the seasons are all reversed and like the stuff doesn't happen in the right way. And like the food is in the river, not on the land. And like everything's like kind of weird. But if you just actually add it up, like it blew my mind.
See, this is why we need a new abundance agenda, because they've hijacked abundance They've
Okay.
hijacked abundance. It's manufactured like horrible life that nobody wants. And then our side is like what? We have the word degrowth, which is like the opposite of what all of us think about what's
Wait.
possible for the future. I hate that.
Okay. So this is the thing. This is why I've become convinced of this.
That we need our
Like
think
what we
tank.
need, yeah, we need something on the second floor of a building, like on like M Street, with like a gold sign that just says like, I don't know, like Grassland Research Institute, period. And then you just put all of this stuff with a letterhead on top and the imprimatur of a researcher, and you send it out. And it's not a bunch of hippies on a chat that we like can't even figure out how to use microphones, but you pump it out like these think tanks do. And the audience for this stuff would be incredible. And there's so much low hanging fruit. You just do like, okay, so actually this is what it could feed. Like this is how, if you removed ethanol and you did like Peter style farming, this is how many people it could feed. And you do the math. You do the math for the reporters and the reporters parrot what you say. This is how the whole system works. And then you can get policymakers, because we're collecting them by the handful at this point. You can get policymakers who will actually go and do this and say like, well, look, now I have the research to back it up. And that's just been something nobody's done. With all respect to the Wendell Berrys of the world, it's easy to make it feel like it's vibes. It's easy to make it feel like it's a dream. And I think that's the next step is we need that think tank. And like we need input of people. What are the research papers we could do? And I have a list now. I want to do a study of cancer rates based on how far down in a watershed you are. You can just like visualize how much nasty stuff is being funneled through our aquatic systems.
Yep.
Once you start thinking about this, there's so many papers that could just be done.
There's so many slam dunk things that like are obvious things that everybody wants. This is like why the Maha thing kind of did sort of garner a coalition. Like a lot of people, and you know, to Nate's point, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people don't want pollution. They don't want chemicals. You know, they want healthy food. They want an abundant environment. They want like nice work to be able to do, enjoyable work. I don't know. I just feel like they want like national sovereignty. They want food sovereignty. You know, it's a lot of different people want these things, but you do have to frame it the right way and explain it for people. I don't know. Now I'm getting
James,
jazzed up.
I would apply to your think tank. I think I
Okay.
have the necessary background to work at
I
your
think
think
you
tank.
may be one of the only people who has the background.
I think it's maybe only the five of us, but no, I'm just kidding. There's probably like at least 3 or 4 more out there.
There's dozens of us, to use the meme.
Well, I mean, the thing to speak genuinely, like, I think the thing about this kind of stuff is that you create the think tank and then you discover that there's a gajillion people at Temple and the University of Iowa who are dying to do this kind of thing, but don't have an outlet for it. And that's where it goes to the next.
I think
Yeah.
that's right, for sure.
No, I experience that pretty frequently when I give talks at conferences, and I'll have, a half a dozen people come up to me who are either working like at a state DNR or at the Soil Conservation Service, NRCS, or they're professors in universities saying like, how can we like help like push this forward? Like they don't have any institutional structures or, any way to like, channel any of this energy. So
yeah, that's actually
Anyone
pretty
listening
exciting.
we need like 10 million in startup funds to like really get people like Jason and Peter researching full time.
Yeah.
So you can find my email.
I'll cowboy on the weekends.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be starting a perennial nursery, so I'll have to do that. We'll need some work-life balance there, James.
Well, that's what the robots are for.
Yes.
To do my
Yeah.
nursery. I'll have the robots do my research.
I think we're way better off with the robots doing the spreadsheet.
He
Robots
wants to
do the
nursery.
spreadsheets.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there is like there's just a lot of people out there working in this direction who don't have a lot of organization in it, and like a lot of them are just like apolitical too. It could be from either side, like you guys were saying, like just researchers who care about you know, like they spend their whole career studying some frog and then they just care about like riparian areas staying pollution free and not killing this frog that they love. Like there's so many people out there like that. It's pretty cool. I like this idea.
There's a lot of good thinkers. There's a lot of good thinkers in the grazing space too. I think there's a lot of, a lot of people who look at this question holistically. I think, if you really graze, you end up doing that. Like if your livelihood is grazing and you're paying attention to grazing animals, like it kind of does that to your mind.
Yeah. So Jason, are you not
That's why Peter's crazy.
It's the cow's fault.
Well, I remember Peter, you were saying this. I'm sure this is not you fine with me sharing this, but how one time you're walking through the field and you're holding a pole. Do you remember this? And you
Yeah.
just kind of had like this ancestral memory, or do you want to recount that?
I had just moved the cows to another part of the farm, as far away from my house as I have, about a mile away. And I had come back, and I've remembered that the last time I had been there was like a problem in the fence, and I needed to like go bring a fence post out. So I just like grabbed a fence post, and I didn't even go like to the barn to get the UTV. I just started jogging, and I'm like halfway out. Then I'm carrying this fence post, and I'm realizing that I've like naturally holding it balanced in my hand, and I'm jogging, and it feels really, really natural. And I'm like thinking like, man, I've done this before. When have I done that? I'm looking at my fence post and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's my spear. I have done this before, like a million times.
I love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
awesome.
Somebody's trademarked the phrase, and it makes me really sad because we get talking like this, and to like the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about the Kingsnorth's book, and the slogan, "Graze against the machine," just goes to my head, and I'm like, man, somebody out there trademarked that phrase, and it makes me mad
Did they?
because it's
Who
perfect.
did? Who owns it?
Some farm somewhere.
I still use it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Peter
Peter
uses
just
it.
uses
Fuck.
it.
He's like, come on, come
I'm
at
not selling anything. I'm not selling
Right.
anything with
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
But it is
I just,
great. Yeah.
it's perfect. It's perfect, actually, like literally perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When
Well, it was
when we
cool
get the $10 million, we'll deploy a couple $100,000. We'll buy it.
to get that
Nice.
phrase back.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that'll be worth it. Yeah, there was the beginning of Kingsnorth's book, the first page has this Wendell Berry quote about living as creatures and not as machines. And then just crazy like to have that Wendell Berry quote be the first thing you have in your book, standing alone, and then he's at the Berry Center and like meeting Wendell Berry. And I just like that whole like creatures versus machine
Yeah.
dichotomy. That was just like such a cool moment in time that we got to see that, Peter. That was neat.
Well, and the quote, the Barry quote, is that in the near future, the great division in America and on Earth is between those who will live as creatures and those who will live as machines. Like he's talking about this bifurcation point that I think we've all, like, it's already started. We're like well within this bifurcation event, but yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm somewhat convinced already that like just the five of us and the people in our circle are starting to, by nature or because of our Luddism and our like cantankerousness, are starting to be quite different from other people cognitively and like I don't know, emotionally, and like just people who are like leaning in completely to like constantly having conversations with AI day in and day out, like just like it's just there's gonna just be like a crazy spike in weird, neurotic, unhealthy mental behavior from people who just kind of lean into this 100%. I don't know like how that's gonna go, but I think there's a lot of people who want out and are looking.
Crazy spike in poor mental health is well underway.
Yeah, it seems like it's accelerating though. I don't know. I mean, you're the psychologist.
I mean, if that's accelerating.
Yeah, that is how that's defined acceleration.
James, I'm just trying to figure out how we would do that study with cancer rates and where you are on the watershed. I think we could figure it out. I think we can do it. Yeah. Well, we did that kind of stuff. We did that kind of stuff in my master's degree where you use GIS and you use GIS for spatial analysis stuff. Like that kind of stuff was like a term paper.
Right.
There's a lot you have to control for. Yeah.
Easy.
You have to control for a lot of stuff.
You broke your
Oh.
arm, James? Wait, from a long time ago. Yes, I do know.
You didn't announce it on Twitter, so how would I ever know? Oh,
Okay. Yeah, we can call it. It's a nice Friday afternoon. We got to all catch up. We're going to do this every 2 weeks, Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. And so, yeah, join us. We might have a rotating cast of characters we let in here.
James, we were talking about maybe dropping the link next time, and we started a new group chat called the New
New
Agrarians.
Agrarians,
And I was thinking
or
of just dropping the link
let
in there
in
next
some
time.
other DO people who have been at events or whatever. Let it get a
We didn't
little.
want to do it this time because Ashley thought you were too sensitive for it.
But yes, I said let James do one first. Also, James is he's the king of no, this is doomer optimism. That's different from other things. Like we're doomer optimism. So I don't know,
People lit on things.
I know. I want to invite everybody, Jason too. I'm a party planner. But all right. Good catching up with you guys. This is very nice. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bye,
See you
guys.
guys. Take care.
All right.